Afternoon. First, I'd like to reflect on what has occurred in the local economy and the real estate markets here in Silicon Valley since my previous presentation to you. It was in March of last year. You know, COVID inserted a level of uncertainty in the global economy that made normal economic analysis very difficult. Silicon Valley, as we all know, is a global magnet for high-risk venture capital. So when things are good, they're very, very good. But when things turn down, the descent around here can be dramatic. It's like when Warren Buffett said, it's only when the tide goes out that you learn who is swimming naked. COVID has been a monumental health and humanitarian crisis of global significance. COVID upended the world that we thought we knew. COVID painfully impacted the most vulnerable American households, creating serious economic dislocation. Silicon Valley has the highest level of income and wealth inequality in the United States, which increased dramatically during COVID. The gaps between the haves and the have-nots have increased, creating significant income and racial disparities. The wealth index, measured by GDP, saw Silicon Valley grow by an astounding 19% between 2019 and 2021. That's the largest increase in the country. The COVID disruption impacted the way we engaged with others in social activities, how we interacted with others in the workplace, how we traveled, how we shopped, even how we purchased groceries. Business investment, retail sales, home construction, exports, and consumer and government spending all reached record levels of decline during COVID. The federal government, and to a lesser extent the state, reacted to this crisis very quickly by providing a huge financial stimulus to boost the economy, over $2.5 trillion in direct payments and over $1 trillion in tax relief. Well, in my opinion, the federal stimulus was excessive and completely undisciplined. The purpose of a stimulus is to put money in the hands of people, expecting that the people will spend the money, boosting the economy. Well, during COVID, people could not spend the money they received because everything was shut down. So many people saved their stimulus. The result? A significant increase in savings, not spending, which is contrary to the purpose of a stimulus payments to begin with. During COVID, Americans were stockpiling savings, which reached a record 30-year high. Consumer loans and credit card balances reached their lowest level in many years. But suddenly, beginning in the last half of 2021, Americans started spending at record levels, first on the goods side of the economy and then on the services side. The economy came roaring out of the COVID recession. Consumers couldn't stop spending and prices wouldn't stop rising. Consumer spending is the primary driver of the U.S. economy, accounting for over 70% of all economic activity. The U.S. economy ran headfirst into a perfect storm of high demand and low supply, soaring prices, and rising interest rates. Robust consumer spending, combined with widespread product and worker shortages, created the highest inflation since the 1980s. Consumer demand was simply greater than the economy's ability to meet that demand. Inflation is nothing more than too much dollars pursuing too few goods. Inflation wiped out strong gains in wages and salaries, which was flowing to American workers. The Fed has increased interest rates 11 times in an attempt to tame persistently high inflation. The result, inflation has recently started to cool. California consumer confidence hit a 4-year low in September. Wages are finally rising faster than inflation. The Wall Street Journal reported the probability of a recession in the next 12 months is steadily declining. It's very delicate. The Fed has been attempting to bring down prices, slow the economy and job and wage growth without plunging the economy into a recession. That is a notoriously difficult task. There's always a risk in the Fed doing too little to curb inflation, and also a risk in doing too much. It's virtually impossible to fully restore price stability without increasing unemployment. and the U.S. job market has remained very healthy. California actually added jobs in August. American workers have enjoyed unheard job security since COVID. The balance of power in the job market is gradually tilting back to employers. Supply and demand are coming into a better balance. Since mid-2022, high-profile tech companies, and we've all read about this, including PayPal, Google, Amazon, Salesforce, Microsoft, Meta, Intel, Oracle, Roku, Twitter, Seagate, and Cisco, have all announced large-scale job cuts, more than 25,000 in total. The collapse of 4 banks has added to that insecurity. Banks' growing concern about slower economic growth has caused them to constrict lending to businesses and households, resulting in a slowdown of economic activity, which is, I guess, exactly what the Fed wants to see. Corporate profits fell 7% from a year earlier in the first 3 months of this year. Supply chains are no longer clogged. Furniture and appliances have all declined, but the prices of food and services, such as restaurants, airlines, and healthcare, are still high, and fuel is rising dramatically, as we all know, at the gas pump. As American savings began to deplete, shoppers have become more cautious, spending more on their needs rather than their wants. So are we in a recession, or will we be in a recession? Well, the U.S. economy has been sending mixed messages about that. Inflation is slowing, yet the economy is stubbornly continuing to grow. Our economy is resilient in the face of turmoil. Some economists believe that you're not in a recession when you have a solid job market in which wages have increased 4.5% from a year ago, an economy that has created 3.5 million jobs, with unemployment at 3.7% today, which is the lowest level since 1969 and well below full employment, and nearly 9.6 million job openings, 1.3 million job openings for every unemployed worker. The Bay Area has had 80% of all jobs in California in June, nearly half of them in Santa Clara County, offsetting big tech job losses which continue to escalate. There are 415,600 more people employed in California than pre-pandemic levels. California's problem is not really jobs, but a contracting labor supply, which has declined by 171,000 since 2020. Silicon Valley's labor force is at the lowest since June of 2022, and the unemployment rate is just 3%. 4 million U.S. workers quit their jobs last year, and 3 million dropped out of the labor force altogether. That's unprecedented. This year, the number of workers leaving their jobs has declined significantly, however. COVID also gave many people time to rethink their lives and their careers, and many have decided to ditch previous jobs in industries like restaurants and hospitality for higher pay and benefits in transportation and warehousing, for example, providing a more consistent work schedule. Then there's quiet quitting, people trying to balance work life with real life. Workers also discovered that they could leverage a chaotic labor market to their advantage, a rare opportunity to demand better pay and working conditions. And finally, retirements, accelerated during COVID. The U.S. labor market is very perplexing. The Gen Z generation is smaller than the millennial generation. Older adults outnumber children for the first time in U.S. history. Life expectancy in the U.S. has dropped to its lowest level since 1996. California's population fell 1.2% between 2020 and 2022, and the Bay Area's population dropped 3% during the same period. Universal pre-K education would allow more women to enter or re-enter the labor force. The long-term future of the job market is somewhat clouded, as more baby boomers have left the labor force than millennials, those born after 1980, or Gen Zers born after 1996 are entering the labor force. In the long term, this could have serious consequences. Baby boomers grew up in households of 3 to 4 children. Demographers tell us that the millennials are having an average of 1.2 children. Consequently, there won't be sufficient Gen Zers, the children of millennials, to maintain a stable workforce in the future. Serious immigration reform allowing increased legal immigration, combined with robotics, is the only solution to meet our future workforce demands. Silicon Valley needs increased immigration. We need more foreign workers coming to this country. Americans, however, have demonized immigration and the political rhetoric that comes with it. Fortunately, the Bay Area is faring a little bit better. With the easing of restrictions by the Biden administration, migrants from other countries have increased 174% in the Bay Area. So where are we today? How would I describe today's economy? Well, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and certainly unpredictable. Geopolitical problems, often out of our control, also create great uncertainty. But as Warren Buffett says, volatility can also create opportunity. There are some concerning headwinds at this very moment. A government shutdown could take thousands of government employees off payrolls, drastically reducing consumer spending. Student loan payments resumed for 44 million Americans. Combined with record oil prices, this will squeeze Americans' shoppers' budgets. Long-term, the Bay Area economic challenges remain the same: housing, transportation, and economic competitiveness. California, as we all know, is a large, diverse economy. And that diversity is our strength because it creates a broader economic base. Silicon Valley's economy is structured to resist long-term declines in economic activity. Big tech has a special kind of resilience because innovation is the driving force behind our success. Santa Clara County's economy, measured in terms of GDP, jumped a whopping 13% in the last 3 years. Economic uncertainty and COVID didn't stop venture capital investments, however. Venture capital, led by a record number of mega deals in the Bay Area, accounted for nearly 40% of all VC investments in the U.S. in 2020 and 2021. The Bay Area accounted for 24% of all tech startups in the U.S. 20,000 patents were granted to Silicon Valley in 2022. Fast forward to today, however, the number of VC deals have dropped 44%, and the money raised is down 57%. That's the lowest level in 10 years. Long term, however, the outlook for Silicon Valley economy is bright. Electric vehicles, battery technologies, artificial intelligence, and clean energy will keep Silicon Valley high on the list of economic success for some time to come. So what are some of the economic implications of this pandemic on our real estate markets? Well, the most obvious, the travel, hospitality, and leisure sectors. They were hit first and hit hardest. Hotels that depend primarily on business travelers, which is the largest source of hotel revenue, have been slow to recover. In San Francisco, business travel is down 40%, with hotel occupancy at just 68%. The lack of conferences and conventions, in addition to the decline of international travelers, is the reason for that. 2 of San Francisco's largest Union Square hotels have defaulted on their loans. Nationally, new hotel investments have declined 60%. In Santa Clara County, hotel investments suddenly stopped in 2023 after a torrent of new hotels in 2021 and 22. Hotel bookings in San Jose are down 20% and increasing, and restaurants are even worse. Only in resort areas like Tampa, Phoenix, Las Vegas, San Diego, and Miami has hotel performance surged after COVID. The airlines and hospitality industries are dependent upon each other. Leisure and business travel has increased as the public gains confidence in the health and safety of airline travel. As businesses, however, become comfortable with Zoom and webinars, this could have a more permanent impact on business travel and ultimately on lodging. Next, the retail sector. The increasing prevalence of online shopping versus traditional brick and mortar stores all point in the same direction. Online sales continue to grow exponentially faster than in-store sales. Bloomberg reported that 11,000 restaurants, more than 10% of all restaurants in the United States, closed permanently. The retail landscape is mixed, fueled by stronger than expected consumer spending. Top-tier malls are recovering nicely, reflecting the resilience of consumer spending. Lower-tier malls, not so much. The French company, the principal owner of Valley Fair and Oak Ridge right here in San Jose, the largest owner of retail malls in the world, announced last year that it would divest the company of all malls in the U.S. over the next 3 years. The Paseo, a 600,000 square foot, 120 square mall in Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena, covering 3 city blocks, was recently acquired via a deed in lieu when the owner defaulted on the loan. San Diego's Horton Plaza, a 900,000 square foot open air 5-level retail mall encompassing 6.5 city blocks, has been redeveloped completely as a mixed-use tech and life science hub. And finally, you read about this recently, Westfield Mall in San Francisco is surrendering the city's biggest shopping center back to the lender. UBS projects that 50,000 brick and mortar retail stores will close in the next 5 years. The U.S. is simply overstored. A sturdy job market and steady gains in real income are keeping retail afloat, especially strip retail centers in the suburbs, as people shift where they live and where they shop. Traditional shopping centers, particularly older malls, are being repurposed to consumer centers with a mixture of uses, including fitness, health and wellness, co-working operations, or being converted to things like affordable housing, distribution centers for e-commerce, classrooms, churches, museums, and even transitional space for the homeless. Local elected leaders must give up their love affair with retail shopping centers for the sales tax revenue, as in-store retail is a declining enterprise. For retail to be reborn, I believe that the industry must reposition itself with a new, fresh, flexible approach focusing on the experience, not just on the products. This often includes renovating older, outdated shopping centers with dining and entertainment, focused on attracting new, young shoppers and audiences. Suburban retail centers are holding up from steady consumer spending fueled by low unemployment and solid wage growth. With the inevitability of autonomous cars, vast surface parking lots present an opportunity for housing development. Millennials are a driving force behind e-commerce. Millennials grew up in a one-click world where speed and convenience is expected, indeed demanded. The barrage of retail bankruptcies, store closures, diminishing revenues, it's truly become a survival of the fittest as name brand debt-ridden retailers, and we all know their names: Circuit City, Mervyn's, Borders Books, Loehmann's, Sports Authority, Linens and Things, Toys R Us, Payless Shoes, Forever Tuesday, Tuesday Morning, Orchard Supply, J. Crew, Lord & Taylor, Brooks Brothers, Steinmart, Pier 1 Imports, Bed Bath & Beyond recently, and Sears continue to disappear or file for bankruptcy. One retail leader described it as the 3 C's: closures, consolidations, and contractions. Excess Space Solutions Company projects that retailers are expected to downsize their storefront space by 40 to 50% over the next 10 years. Nevertheless, e-commerce sales still represent only 15% of total retail sales, Well, 4 in every 5 U.S. consumers regularly shop online, and 40% of those online shoppers buy something on Amazon once a month. In my household, I think it's once a week. At the same time, we are seeing a transformational turn in the retail industry. It's called clicks to bricks. Established e-commerce retail brands have been opening brick and mortar retail locations, benefiting from their e-commerce brand and success, building a retail presence, but most importantly, improving their distribution footprint. So are there any winners? Yes, there are. Walmart, Target, Costco, and Amazon, and others. Amazon's market cap is greater than the market cap of the other 15 retailers combined. The others include Walmart, Costco, Target, Nordstrom, Best Buy, and 10 others. That's incredible. Amazon's acquisition of Whole Foods sent shockwaves through the grocery industry. One industry expert described it as Amazon declaring war on every supermarket and corner store in America. Many believe that Amazon, Apple, Google, and Facebook are abusive monopolies and that our markets are no longer competitive. Google has a 92% market share and accounts for 22% of the S&P 500 all by itself. Apple owns 4 of the 5 biggest apps and 79% of the smartphone profits. Facebook has 2 billion subscribers, nearly as many as Christianity has followers. Apple recently became a $3 trillion company. Google, Apple, and Facebook account for 20% of all tech jobs in Silicon Valley. Global unrest and a volatile stock market, tech layoffs, and 60% increase in mortgage rates, a 23-year high, by the way, has pushed monthly mortgage payments past what buyers can afford. Mortgages made in Silicon Valley and Santa Clara County dropped 71%. Bay Area home sales plummeted earlier this year before suddenly rebounding, increasing 5% in August. The residential market has become more evenly matched between buyers and sellers, but new listings and for sale inventory remain historically low. The housing crisis, I think, is more a supply problem than an affordability problem. Many home prices are more volatile than the national average. They typically rise faster during boom times and fall further during recessions because our region is really tied to the boom-bust tech sector. In Silicon Valley, however, luxury home sales are often impacted more by the stock market than by mortgage rates. Wealthy tech professionals, driven by record stock prices and the previous low interest rates, purchased expensive homes, frequently all cash. Many potential buyers have concluded that the economics of renting is better than buying right now, including the newest trend, single-family detached homes for rent. Millennials and high interest rates are driving the demand for this type of product. JP Morgan recently invested $1 billion in a build-to-rent venture. With astronomical home prices and high interest rates, wannabe home buyers are forced to rent. San Jose's apartment rents, however, increased 4.8% in the first half of this year. San Jose's resilient apartment environment was surprising to me compared to other major markets throughout the country. The jury is still out on the long-term impact of teleworking on the office market. More and more companies are slowly bringing employees back to the office or adopting a hybrid model as teleworking's popularity gradually subsides. Intense networking, an important component of Silicon Valley's ecosystem, is hard to successfully network and collaborate on Zoom. Until the last half of 2022, Silicon Valley's commercial market was surprisingly strong. 132 office and R&D buildings representing 15.1 million square feet of space were purchased last year in 2022. LinkedIn, Tesla, Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook completed major leases and property acquisitions last year. Apple purchased 10 billions, as I'm sure you know, in Cupertino. Just a few years ago, the Class A office buildings were the darling of commercial real estate investments. Well, not anymore. Rising vacancy rates, declining rental rates, the absence of big leasing deals, and the continuation of hybrid and remote working has driven the office vacancy rate in Silicon Valley to almost 29% in the third quarter of this year. In San Francisco, the office vacancy is a whopping 33%. Boston Properties halted construction for the second time on Platform 16, the 1.1 million square foot building in San Jose. The company stopped construction when COVID hit in 2020 and resumed construction in 2022 and then suspended it again amid the feeble office market. The office and commercial property markets are impacted from several directions. Inflation, of course, interest rates, demographics, geopolitics, energy costs, overvalued buildings, disruption in technology, think AI, and similar and shorter leases in all cases. Many small businesses continue to grapple with inflation, high interest rates, and labor shortages. CBRE ranked the Bay Area as the most concerning commercial property market of the 10 major U.S. markets this year. There is increasing interest in converting vacant office buildings to residential use. Well, my experience is, and I believe that most office buildings are not physically or economically convertible. Finally, listen to this. Converting vacant office space to vertical farms, growing fruits and vegetables. That's incredible. After a robust 2-year run of low vacancies in the 2 to 4% range, the Silicon Valley industrial and warehouse markets are softening a bit, with vacancy rates of 7%. That's in June, but still well below pre-COVID levels. The increase in online shopping versus traditional brick and mortar stores have demanded more logistical facilities. Logistics and data centers are hot, and it's not just a one-off. I believe it's a serious trend. As consumers shift from in-store purchasing to online, and consumers demand faster shipments, often same-day delivery, e-commerce distribution centers must be located closer to city centers. Then there's reverse logistics, the need to facilitate the increase in the number of returns. This will continue to fuel, I believe, demand for the logistics sector. COVID also took its tolls on tax revenues. Government spending is an important component to a healthy economy. There's a connection between economic growth and tax revenues. When tax revenues decline, so does government spending. McKinsey & Company analyzed the impact of automation on job growth and concluded that 46% of jobs could be replaced by the current methods of automation by 2030. For example, there are 3.5 million truck drivers, 700,000 bus drivers in the U.S. who will be displaced by autonomous trucks and buses. Cruise, a subsidiary of General Motors, and Waymo are operating robot cars without backup drivers on the streets of San Francisco today. We've been reading about that. Goldman Sachs economists estimate that 1/4 of all jobs will be completely eliminated by AI. AI, in addition to teleworking, accounts for a portion of the office vacancies that exist today. AI are really prediction machines. They are expected to increase productivity by 50%, but they don't include judgment. Human judgment is still required with AI. And finally, I'd like to comment on the concern over the Great California Exodus, also known as the doom loop. And while it's a concerning trend, it is not a crisis. In the past 2 years, 717,000 Californians moved out of the state, and 385,000 moved to California from other states. That's a net loss of 331,000 people. or less than 1% in a state with 40 million people. Hardly a crisis. What is disturbing, however, is those fleeing the state took 29 billion of taxable income with them, compared to the taxable income the new Californians brought to this state, a 30% reduction. So where do these Californians go? Well, we all heard about it: Texas, Arizona, Nevada, Washington, and Oregon primarily. And where did these new Californians come from? Well, Texas, 36,000, Arizona, Nevada, 25,000, Washington, 28,000, and surprisingly, New York. San Jose lost 50,000 residents since 2020, dropping San Jose from the 10th largest city in the US to the 12th. 60% of employees who left San Jose and Silicon Valley stayed in Northern California, primarily for cheaper housing. There are many things that affect the loss of populations besides Californians fleeing to Texas and Arizona. A significant decrease in births, reduction in immigration, which I talked about earlier, a rise in deaths, many COVID related, and fewer people coming to California and Silicon Valley. Many Silicon Valley companies are adjusting their compensation to reflect the lower cost of living for employees working remotely in lower cost of living areas. In Silicon Valley, only 4 major companies left California, but by and large, their workforce didn't follow. Tesla is still manufacturing automobiles in Fremont. Last year, Tesla leased a 325,000 square foot building in North San Jose, and this year, a 320,000 square foot building in Palo Alto. Recently, California passed Germany as the 4th largest economy in the world. California's market capitalization increased 117% in the last 3 years. Now, you never want to lose population, because last year, California lost a congressional seat. But a crisis? I don't think so. A concerning trend? Probably. The global attraction of big tech in Silicon Valley is not going to contract anytime soon. 80% of all tech and R&D occurs right here in Silicon Valley, and that's not going to change anytime soon. I think the demise of Silicon Valley in California is grossly exaggerated. So these are my observations today, but in this economy, tomorrow could be completely different. So stay tuned. Now, I would be happy to answer any questions that you have if we have time. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Interesting talk. Does anybody have any questions at this time? We have time.
We have the Apple folks on the line. I talked about them quite a bit.
You did.
Hi, Deb. I'm not sure if you can see, but I do have my hand up. Larry, this is Marissa Spatafor from De Anza College, and I listened with interest to your remarks on the labor force and what that needs to grow. And I would be curious, you didn't mention how education, higher education, will impact that. So I wondered if you had any particular viewpoints on that.
Well, anytime the labor force is being expanded through smarter people, I guess you'd say better educated people is a better way to say, that's a good thing. But I don't think it has the significant impact that the other things that I discussed have, but it's certainly important.
If I could follow up, though, if you're speaking about increased immigration, are you referring to, I mean, presumably these folks would need some additional education, right? Or are you talking about different visa holders?
I think both. I mean, the thing is, as I mentioned, immigration has been demonized, but immigration is important, not just the people illegally crossing the border. I mean, that's of concern, and it is a significant issue. And I'm talking about immigration of people from all over the world that desire to come here, who in many cases already have skill sets and education, and those were restricted almost entirely by the Trump administration, and I think the Biden administration, as I mentioned, have reduced those restrictions, and particularly in Silicon Valley, we need those people coming in on visas and so forth. I mean, right here, I have my own IT department. And a significant number of them, about 30 people, I guess, something like a significant portion of those are people who are highly educated, highly skilled tech workers that came from other countries that we just don't manufacture enough here.
Okay, person with their hand raised that's next is Mark.
Hi, Larry. Mark Burns.
Hi, Mark.
Had questions. Hopefully, they're all related and very short. What do you have the figures for what our increase in property tax revenue, the tax collectors' revenue from last year to this year? I think you've got a new report coming out soon. Do you have numbers for the increases for that?
Yeah. Our new report is going to press early next week, so you'll be getting it soon, Mark. Well, last year meaning, you know, the assessment year for assessors from January 1st to December 31st, we were up 6.2%. It was surprising it was that high given the economic circumstances here, but what we found, a couple things. Number one is that the first half of 2022 was very strong, and it didn't start to fall off the cliff until the last half. So balancing the first 6 months with the last 6 months accounted for a 6.2% increase. The other important component of increasing property tax revenue is business personal property, machinery, equipment, computers, and so forth like that. And that had a real surprising increase, but it was really inflation based. In other words, business property, depreciates in value. You know, the longer you own a machine or a computer, the less value it is. But it's based upon schedules, depreciation schedules that are provided to us by the state of California, and I believe the BOE, the Board of Equalizations. And because inflation was affecting that type of equipment and computers, we got an unusual boost. Now, let me fast forward, Mark, to this next year. Significant differences. We're going to see, I mean, you never see a reduction in total property tax revenue. It's only happened in one year in 2010 during my tenure as assessor, but that was because of the Great Recession. But because all property goes up at 2%, as you know, whether there's any activity or not, but our property transfers, which is a large portion of increased property tax revenue when a property changes hands, for example, are down almost 50% this year. We're going to see, and we'll see, significant increase in assessment appeals. Because, I mean, this year, we proactively reduced the assessment on 17,000 properties at the close of the roll on July 1st. We're going to see more of that. But we'll see a lot with commercial properties, but we don't look at those in advance because the value of commercial property is based upon income levels and vacancies and stuff, and we need to get that information from the individual companies. But we expect a significant increase in assessment appeals this coming year because of what's happening in the economy. Long answer to your first question. I'm sorry, but I think that's very interesting.
Okay, real quick, just to follow up on that. how does that match up with city and county spending? Are we still behind? Are they increasing faster? Are you able to, is that able to keep up with that? Or do we find more, more spending, maybe past the 6.2? Does do the budgets increase 7, 8, 9% at the same time? It seems to be the trend over the last 10 or 20 or 30 years.
I don't know what the percentage is, but I agree. And I'm sure that the executives here at the county would not like me to say this, but I think that spending at the county level at least has been excessive beyond what it should be. Now, a lot of that is not the management of the county. It really falls from the board of supervisors. I mean, COVID was a significant problem economically and financially to all governments, and the county was no different. But you can't continue to blame COVID on everything in the future, at least. But boards of supervisors, a board of supervisors says, well, here's a good idea, and so they vote and they pass it, and they pass the responsibility for implementing that onto the staff. And let's face it, with homelessness and the various kind of things that people are concerned about, there's been much more demands upon government. I'm not making excuses for excess spending, but there's a lot more demand upon what government has to provide and what the citizens expect us to provide. But let me give you a selfless promotion here, self-serving promotion, I guess. In my 28 years as the assessor, almost 29, the number of employees in my office have gone up 7%. There's only, 7 employees. There's only 7 more people that work in my office today than when I arrived on January 1st, 1995. I have returned $31 million of my budget back to the general fund unspent. Only 1 year out of 28 have I overspent my budget. It was for $250,000, and I could never figure out how that happened. So, it can be done. And our assessment role during that same time frame has gone from 115 billion to 620 billion in the 28 years. So things take too long in government. We tend to overspend. You have a problem or there's a new thing. Well, the first thing a lot of bureaucrats think about is, let's hire more people. Well, that's necessary sometimes, but not always.
Thank you, Larry. We do have another question from John.
Thanks so much, and apologies, my camera is having a couple issues, so apologies to not be on screen. John Cowan from El Camino Health. And Larry, I was just curious what your thoughts are on if cities are being realistic with some of their general plans or other plans where they're still looking for that ground floor retail or other retail to replace retail as it goes away, and kind of if you think some of these trends will maybe start to percolate in the planning world.
Well, I've told 2, I think maybe 3 mayors of San Jose that this whole idea of requiring ground storefront retail, below everything you build. You build the office, they demand storefront or retail in the ground floor, or residential, multifamily residential. There are not enough Starbucks and nail salons and all to fill this stuff. And I've told that to Sam Liccardo, and I've told it to the 2 the existing mayor, I think, and talking to him. It's a pipe dream. It's like, you build it and they will come. Well, we've learned in real estate markets that that's not always the case. But it feels good because they're searching for sales tax revenue. And as the economy subsides, you're going to see more vacant storefront retail than you're seeing now.
Thank you.
I have a question about Prop 19.
Mhm.
Yeah, if I'm a senior and I purchased a house like a couple of years ago at 500,000 and sold at 1 million, then I want to purchase another house at 1.2 million. Will be my property tax assessment value be 1 million or 500,000?
If you're over the ripe old age of 55, Prop 19, what we call the base year transfer, it allows you to transfer your low assessed value to another property, and Prop 19 went from a limitation of that to just 10 counties to every county in the state, and you can do it 3 times instead of just once, and carry that low assessed value. If you increase the amount, in other words, you go from, well, I thought what your example was $1 million to 1.5, then
1.2. 1.2.
yeah, okay, whatever it is. I mean, you're trading up, if you will. Then Proposition 19 allows you to carry your low assessed and existing assessment, and then you have to allow for the difference, the percentage increase in the advance of or the increase in the new home. Now, the other part of Proposition 19, if you have a minute here, I mean, it'll take a couple minutes for me to explain this, but it's right hot on the in the political world right now. The realtors, and there's some of them on the line here, sponsored a proposition in 2018 called Proposition 15, I think, and it was to allow the base year transfer to any county in the state. Same thing to do, and the state auditor said that would cost a reduction in property tax revenue of $1 billion a year. And so labor, along with the schools, got together and told the realtors in 2018 that if they put that on the ballot, that labor combined with the schools would take it down. But the realtors had already qualified Proposition 15 for the ballot. So they knew they were going to lose. And so they, even though it was on the ballot, they never supported it. And it went down about 60-40. So the realtors had a problem. How to capture a base year transfer of what was used to be Prop 90 to other places in the county. Where were they going to get the revenue to offset that $1 billion a year that was projected to be lost? So they went over to the other side, generational transfers. In other words, the ability to transfer your residential property to your children or your grandchildren. And so they made some restrictions on that allowed for reduction in revenue on the Prop 90 side of things. I'm getting too technical here, I think, to the generational transfer side. So that's the part of it's very controversial right now. There's a ballot measure that is being circulated right now to try to change the generational transfer part of the deal that the realtors made with the schools.
So the Prop 19 only applies like for 10 counties in California, not the whole California.
No, it allows for the transfer to all counties in the state. That was the principal purpose of Prop 19. I voted for Proposition 19 for that very basis. I thought, I mean, I never liked Prop 90 to begin with, but I thought, you know, why should grandma be restricted to 10 counties to get closer to the grandkids? If it existed from 10 counties, we should probably give it to everybody. So now if you have a Prop 19 transfer, you can go to any county in the state.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, are there any more questions for Larry? I don't see any more hands raised. I don't have anything in the chat. Okay, I just have a couple of announcements before we end the meeting. Please, everybody, remember that we have the largest Diwali festival in at least the South Bay area on October 14th. I hope to see everybody there. And then coming up on November 17th, we have the Star Awards, and please note the date change from earlier in November. If nobody has anything else, I'll give you back about 31 minutes. Thank you, Larry. And thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.